Please be seated. All right, so I'm not sure what's going on with the crackling and the speakers today. This is like, many of you know, a new sound system. And this is what the old one used to do when the batteries were low in my little mic, so that could be possible. Anyway, I apologize for the crackling, and just know these are the growing pains of a new sound system. So I want to start today with a quote from Oscar Romero. Oh, I should say first, can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Quote from Oscar Romero, who I know many of you know and are fans of. He said, "There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried." I was thinking about this quote a lot this week. I had a long conversation with a dear friend of mine who I knew actually from seminary. So I've been friends with him for 25 years. We were both childless when we met. He was unmarried. And now, of course, life has happened and we're middle-aged and all of that. He lives in Virginia, and it was the first conversation that he and I had had since January of 2025, this past January, when he and his wife lost their 16-year-old son to the flu. We spoke for several hours, and he told me all about how his life had changed since this loss. He was telling me about how he found himself making decisions differently, how he saw people differently, and how he saw the world differently. And he said, "I honestly didn't know a human being could feel this much pain and not die." And then he said in the next breath, "I see so much more beauty in the world now." Although his story of loss is not mine, I do have some sense of what he means. Like many of you, like all of you probably, I've had a couple of those really big traumatic losses that reframe everything. And at first, after a loss like that, you can't see anything except your own grief, your own shame, your own agony. But in time, if you keep swimming in those waters, you do find treasures that you could not see before, all over the world, all over your life. It's mysterious, but somehow our capacity for grief can deepen our capacity for gratitude. It's mysterious. I don't understand it. It certainly doesn't always happen, but I know that it can be true. The ability to see our own fragility and our own suffering, this can either harden us or it can enable us to have more compassion for the suffering of others. Either way, it changes how we see. In our gospel reading for today, Jesus talks about seeing in a couple different ways. The first time he talks about seeing is when he receives this message through other disciples, through John's disciples, from John the Baptist. Now, you may remember John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. It was a really big deal when they met, when they were both still in utero. They're often thought of and remembered as being close friends, and in some ways, John being a sort of teacher of Jesus. So John the Baptist is in prison. You may also remember about John the Baptist that he's not an easy sort of guy. He likes to speak his mind. He's one of these people who cannot suffer hypocrisy. These people are holy, and we need them in the world. And so he's made a mistake by calling out the king on a marriage that is unethical and has landed himself in prison. Now, the thing about prison is that you don't have a whole lot to do. So you can imagine John pacing in his cell, wondering what's going on, what's happening, what is Jesus up to? And receiving messages himself, probably feeling kind of disappointed. because Jesus has not instigated a political uprising yet. Jesus has not started separating the good from the bad and condemning people, which is kind of what John was looking for. And so he sends his messengers to ask, are you the one we're waiting for, or is it somebody else? It's kind of a challenge to this message from John. I mean, he had spent years preaching about the coming of Jesus, but he had preached an arrival that was more about judgment and condemnation. Jesus is delivering nothing of the sort. And furthermore, and this also probably bothered John, he was not using his special Messiah powers to go get John out of prison. We can imagine that John feels disappointed, at least. More likely, as I said, he's pacing in his cell, wondering if everything he's done with his life has been for nothing. Wondering if he has trusted the wrong people. Wondering if he's, after all, just wrong. And to be honest, John is kind of wrong. He is the one who prepares the way for Jesus, but that doesn't mean that his message is the same as the message of Jesus. John doesn't fully, quote unquote, get it. His vision of God is of one who is much more rooted in judgment and in force. His hopes for the Messiah is for one who will finally just turn this whole ship around of living under occupation, of a corrupt religious establishment. John is looking for a Messiah to clean house, but his hopes have been in the wrong place. And so when he sends the message, are you the one that we've been waiting for, or is there another one? Jesus responds with, go tell John what you see. And this is the first time Jesus talks about seeing in his response. Healing and liberation. Tell John what you see. It's not what John expected to see or is looking for. And so there's a question, will John see this? Then Jesus speaks directly to the people with him. He says, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? Now, the word see here, and those of you who are regular attenders here, you know I don't usually do this thing going back to the original language, but this week it's really interesting, okay? So the word see in this second question is not like a literal seeing like the first one. Here, the word see is more like what we would say, like gawking, or making a spectacle of, to glare at. So when Jesus says, what did you come out here to see? He's not talking just about a way of observing, but instead a way of seeing with the intent to ridicule or to be shocked, kind of like a freak show. You know, we still have people in our culture that fulfill this role. I'm thinking of comedians, politicians, people that attract attention because who knows what kind of unexpected or unfortunate thing they're going to say next, what convention they're going to break. That's kind of the way that word see is functioning here. And again, interesting to note, Jesus did not respond to this message from John with any of that, right? He did not. Maybe people were kind of looking for drama. Maybe they were looking to see, a showdown between Jesus and John, because we know there was some tension between their two followers. But he doesn't respond with an apology, and he doesn't respond by caving in. Like, he doesn't respond like a reed shaken by the wind. Or he doesn't respond with any kind of put down of John. In short, Jesus doesn't take the bait. And you can see how John's message could be interpreted as wanting to start an argument, right? And maybe Jesus sensed that people wanted to see that, but he does not give in to what John or the people seem to be pulling for. And then Jesus asks the same question, what did you come out here to see? But this time again, the word see is a different verb. And this time the verb that is translated see is used to means more like comprehend or understand. So he moves from what did you come here to gawk at to what did you come here to understand? What did you come out here to know? And he's inviting them into something different than mere observation or spectacle, but inviting them into deeper waters. Not just to see on the surface, not just to be entertained or distracted, but to actually see, recognize, understand, be changed. You know, in our culture, there are so many options for what kind of seeing we practice. How we see other people. A lot of these are transmitted to us from our leaders, whether in business or politics or in culture. Those ways of seeing are more like, how can this person potentially be a threat to me? How is this person wrong and in need of my correction? How is this person an insider or an outsider? How is this person my political enemy? How can we make a profit off of this person? How can we hijack people's outrage in order to turn people against one another? Those are very, very dominant ways of seeing in our nation right now. And the ways that we see other people are connected to how we see ourselves, of course. The ways we look in the mirror and instead of seeing a beloved child of God, might see ourselves as not measuring up to who we want to be, or who we used to be, or what other people seem to expect of us. Or maybe we just see what we've done wrong, or how we're broken or not doing things right. In short, seeing ourselves through the lens of fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety about our future, our worthiness, our value. So, you know, John the Baptist, he was wrong about some things, but Jesus loved him unapologetically, deeply. And his response to John was not to correct or shame him or remind him of how wrong he was or how broken he was. It was instead to invite John to see, to understand what was right in front of him. A conversion of seeing. And I do think that that is offered to all of us from God throughout our lives. God invites us to see ourselves not just as broken, not as not living up to some future self or past self, and to see the people around us not just as problems to be fixed or political enemies to be vanquished, but to see every human being as a potential revelation of God's own self. Even when they're wrong. Even when we are wrong. You know, ultimately, of course, Jesus did not rescue John from prison or from death. He did not overturn the political order the way John was hoping. What he did was something quieter and much more dangerous. He revealed a God whose power is not coercion, but is love, not spectacle, but mercy, not domination, but perfect freedom, not condemnation, but forgiveness. And Jesus himself would soon be the one whose eyes cried. He would be the one misunderstood, disappointed by his friends, abandoned, imprisoned, and executed. And it is through those tears that the clearest vision of God is revealed, not in judgment, not in power, but in love poured out. Oscar Romero, of course, was right. There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried. Things like beauty that does not depend on everything being okay. Like hope that is not naive, but is hard-won and grounded and rooted. Like a God who is not offended by our doubts or our wrongness or our disappointment, but who keeps inviting us into new ways of seeing. So I think the question for this third Sunday of Advent is not, do you see clearly yet? But instead, are you willing to let your vision be changed? Even if for a moment, in that moment of conversion, you aren't even sure what it is that you're seeing. Might you be able to see that even failure, when embraced, can become a doorway into greater love? Blessed are those who have cried and love the world through those eyes, because that kind of seeing doesn't just change how we look at things, it changes us. Thanks be to God. I invite you now to stand as you are able and turn to page 358 in the Book of Common Prayer. Every Sunday we affirm the words of the Nicene Creed, not in order to make sure that we're believing the correct thing or not going astray, but because it is our ancient statement of